It's Jackie. Chapter 5 is about the descendants of Adam. Verse 1, in the day when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. When God created Adam in the likeness of God, it meant that he created him to have righteousness and holiness of the truth. Verse 2 says, he created them, male and female, and he blessed them and named them man in the day they were created. He's speaking about Adam and Eve here, so man and woman. Verse 3, when Adam had lived 130 years, he became the father of a son in his own likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. Adam lived 130 years when Seth was born. It doesn't look like Adam and Eve lived very long in the garden before being deceived by the serpent. When it speaks about Seth in verse 3, it says, in his own likeness, according to his image. Seth seems like he may have looked more like Adam. Maybe his personality in his likeness was more like Adam than maybe even Cain or Abel. Kind of like what we talked about, all of the ways that we are like God, according to his likeness. It seems like God is saying this about Seth, according to Adam. Verse 4, then the days of Adam after he became the father of Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Adam lived 800 more years. He also was having more children during this time. I would assume you could have a lot of children in 800 years. Verse 5, so all the days of Adam were 930 years, and then he died. So it doesn't say how he died, it just says he died. So there were theories why people lived so long at this time. One was that the human race was just so genetically pure that people didn't get sick or get diseases like we do today. The other one was that how we had talked about there was no rain back then yet. One of the theories was that because no rain had fallen on the earth, it kept out all of the harmful rays and environmental factors that aged people. Verse 6, Seth lived 105 years and became the father of Enosh. Verse 7, this is when men began to call upon the name of the Lord, or began to call upon God. That's 105 years after Seth was born. Then we see men, all of a sudden it seems to be calling out to God. Verse 7, then Seth lived 807 years after he became the father of Enosh, and he had other sons and daughters. In verse 7, Seth lived another 807 years more and had more sons and daughters. So you can imagine how many children that was as well. It doesn't say who Seth married. It also doesn't say who Cain married. It doesn't really speak about who they married. So that's another mystery that I'm sure we will one day find the answers to. It's obviously not important right now. It's not the point of the story. Can you imagine if God had written down every single detail from the beginning of time till now, how long it would have taken? We would have had a Bible that we would never have been able to read throughout our lifetime, let alone read over and over again. Even with this much information, we're constantly getting nuggets of truths and mysteries revealed to us. Some people get very frustrated that God didn't put everything, every little detail in the Bible. But you got to understand that we will know everything one day. He just had enough room in the Bible to write down the important information. So in verse 8, it says, so all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. It doesn't say how he died, just he died. In verse 9, Enosh lived 90 years and became the father of Kenan. And in verse 10, then Enosh lived 815 years after he became the father of Kenan, and he had other sons and daughters. It's naming certain people, certain children, and this is showing us the lineage of Noah and David, and eventually Jesus. He's not going to name hundreds of children's names. Most people can barely get through just a few names. Verse 11, all the days of Enosh were 905 years, and he died. If you would like to follow along, I'm just going to read through verse 12 to verse 22, and then we'll discuss. Verse 12, Kenan lived 70 years and became the father of Mahalalel. Verse 13, Then Kenan lived 840 years after he became the father of Mahalalel, and he had other sons and daughters. Verse 14, so all the days of Kenan were 910 years, and he died. Verse 15, Mahalalel lived 65 years and became the father of Jared. Verse 16, then Mahalalel lived 830 years after he became the father of Jared, and he had other sons and daughters. Verse 17, so all the days of Mahalalel were 895 years, and he died. Verse 18, Jared lived 162 years and became the father of Enoch. Verse 19, then Jared lived 800 years after he became the father of Enoch, and he had other sons and daughters. Verse 20, so all the days of Jared were 962 years, and he died. Verse 21, Enoch lived 65 years and became the father of Methuselah. Verse 22, then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. Verse 22, it says Enoch walked with God. So not everyone back then were walking with God, but what does that mean? Is it physically walking with God? It does say that those who walked with God were righteous. Sorry, I had a little girl wanting to get in and see mommy because mommy went away for March break and she misses mommy very much. You want to say hi to everyone? You want to say hi? And then I came home and I had to work all week, night shifts and day shifts. She hasn't seen me very much. I wanted to show you Mila. She's my baby girl, the only girl I got. She loves her mommy. Okay. Verse 23, so all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Verse 24, Enoch walked with God and he was not, for God took him. Verse 24 says Enoch was walking with God and then he was gone. He did not see death. Enoch pleased God, and by faith he was taken up with God. His body was never found. Enoch was taken before the flood, before judgment was poured out on that, at the time, wicked and corrupt earth. Enoch taken up with God is a beautiful picture of what the rapture will be like. The Old Testament foreshadows a lot of the New Testament. When I see that Enoch was taken up before the flood happened, it makes me think that the rapture will also happen before God's judgment is poured out onto the earth. Before this God-hating, Christ-rejecting, sinful world is left without him. It's just more confirmation. If we walk with the Lord in these wicked days, enjoying in fellowship the sweet communion of walking with him daily, then we also will be ready when he comes back to take us home. Verse 25, Methuselah lived 187 years and became the father of Lamech. Sometimes we read all this through the Bible. It seems kind of boring. Sometimes we'll find nuggets in between that though. So why did God put these in? It's the lineage that we're following up through to Jesus. Also, these things are told for the historians, the scientists, the scholars, the theologians. Verse 26, then Methuselah lived 782 years after he became the father of Lamech, and he had other sons and daughters. Verse 27, so all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. I also think about each person that's written in the books. I believe it's showing us that no matter how many people are in the world, billions of people in the world right now, God sees those who are obedient to his word. He points those people out who seek him wholeheartedly. That's important to remember when we feel so insignificant in this world. But he sees us, he's with us, and he remembers us, and he knows us, and he's not going to leave us or forsake us. Another point about how it mentions each descendant, each family as it's going down the line, the lineage, is that back then they didn't write everything down. They didn't have the means to write down their history, write down their stories. So instead, they passed along their stories verbally with their beliefs and their traditions from family to family in order to keep track of the promises of God that Christ was coming, that Christ is the Messiah, was the Messiah, and that he would be born in the line of Adam and Eve through Eve, like God had promised back in the garden. We should all still cling to those promises of God in his word. And there are so many promises in the Bible that he's given us that are so full of encouragement, things that we need to not only read, but remember and stand on those promises when we are attacked by Satan, either in our minds or in any way that we're attacked by Satan, that we even speak those promises out. They're powerful. Pray those promises over your children. Pray those promises over your spouse. Verse 28, Lamech lived 182 years and became the father of a son. I was ready to skip over that because every other one said this one lived so and so many years, and then they had sons and daughters. This one lived so many years, and they also had more sons and daughters. But with Lamech, it's different. He lived 182 years and became the father of a son. He lived all that time, it looks like, and didn't have any children. And now he all of a sudden becomes the father of a son, just one son. In verse 29, it says, now he called his name Noah, saying, this one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, arising from the ground which the Lord has cursed. It's a very interesting verse. Noah's birth seems to be changing something here. God told Adam the ground was cursed, and in toil we would eat of it. Then he told Cain that Cain was cursed from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive Abel's blood from Cain's hand. So why did they say Noah came from the ground which the Lord has cursed, and would give them rest from their work and the toil of their hands? Perhaps Lamech just meant that Noah would bring him relief from God's curse, like he would finally have a son to help with the crops, to help plant the seeds and help with the work of the ground. Maybe Lamech was prophesying that there was relief coming from that curse when in the days of Noah the flood would come and the curse would be fulfilled and the land would come back to what it once was. I don't know. Going through the descendants, we see that we can all trace back to Adam and Eve. We're all one family. We are all valuable to God. We are all unique. We can see that God wants us all in his family. Verse 30, then Lamech lived 595 years after he became the father of Noah, and he had other sons and daughters. Verse 31, so all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. Verse 32, Noah was 500 years old, and Noah became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That's the last verse in Genesis chapter 5. But before we end, I just wanted to touch on this order that God first established in the Garden of Eden. When people hear wives submit to your husbands, they get very upset because people have abused this many times throughout history. God gave me another view that I just felt to share. Man was taken out of God's image, woman was taken out of man, and children are taken out of woman. The order is just an order of respect and authority. Think about this the next time you wives don't want to submit to your husband's wisdom. Your life ultimately came from his. This means your children's lives also. Instead of getting so upset about listening to your husband, trying to understand his side of things if you're not on the same page, instead just try to give respect and reverence to him, that your life symbolically is in his hands. And also remember that God gave life to everything. So how much more should we give thanks and respect and reverence to him? I feel that this order is very important for our children to understand. And no, I haven't forgotten that since Eve, men have also come from women. So chivalry, like men giving their seat to a woman, especially a pregnant or an elderly one, or even holding a door for a woman, I want you to know that this sign of respect was not because women were weak. Not at all. This was just to show respect. Men were once children, once nurtured and protected by a woman. It comes full circle. Children are to revere and honor all. If this is instilled when they're young, which hopefully it is, then they grow up to have the respectful authority they were taught as an adult. So how their lives have been nurtured and cared for through their mothers in the womb and hopefully after, which would not have been possible if not for their fathers giving life to them as well. Please honor your mothers and fathers, if for nothing else, for your life. And of course, all life has been given by God. So again, to God, all the glory, all the reverence, all the respect, all the thanks and praise, and all the gratitude. And then again, full circle, God's in this too with us. He comes as a baby. He also grows up respecting all and showing love and honor to his mother Mary, as well as all women, then humbling himself yet again and showing reverence to everyone by serving them. In the end, we honor, respect, serve, love, care for, and submit to all and everyone to us. That is the way of the Lord. And I believe it's what he intended for us. I hope this makes sense. So Adam and Eve knew the assignment and they filled the earth. If Cain did marry his sister or his niece, at that time, the race was still so genetically pure that there wouldn't have been any fear of side effects from incest or marrying a relative. Proverbs says the sacrifice of the wicked is detestable. How much more so when brought with evil intent? So not only are we evaluated on what we give or the quality of it, but also our motives. So when we see Cain cursed, it seems really harsh, but we have to understand God knew his heart, not us. God felt the wickedness in it. He tried to save Cain, but Cain not only gave wicked or detestable, poorly thought out sacrifice to God. It wasn't even a sacrifice. It was just his offering. Then it says in Proverbs, how much more so when brought with an evil intent. So I believe Cain, even when he brought his fruit to God, he didn't have good intentions. He wasn't bringing it with a cheerful heart. God says he loves a cheerful giver. He didn't bring it with love, with an intent to please the Lord, to show favor to God and to bless God and to thank God, and with a cheerful, thankful heart of gratitude, which God so loves. And I think we all love it when people give, even to us, just with a pure intent, with a pure heart. And someone's happy to give you something, isn't it so much more wonderful? Even if it's not a big, grand thing, it's the thought behind it. God's the same way. We are an image of God. We have to remember that the things that we love, when someone's so excited, when your kid wraps up a special rock and they're like, I have you a present, I'm so excited to give it to you. And they're so excited. And it's just, that is more meaningful than any pot of gold or anything that the world sees as valuable. And that is what God is looking for. So when we give, I just encourage you, don't just knock off the zeros and think that your duty's done. It's like a marriage. When it goes so many years, it's so easy to just do the routine of like, oh, it's Valentine's Day, here's some flowers, here's some. But I encourage you as husband and wife as well to make those moments be more than just a compulsion. Listen to your husbands, listen to your wives. When we put thought behind our actions and then put a whole lot of love behind that, that's powerful. That's when blessings come. And that can happen in many, many different ways. Good health, your children walking the straight and narrow, too many ways to count. I just encourage that today. Before you give someone something, pray about it and ask the Lord what he wants you to give. Ask the Lord what he wants you to do. And then you know for sure that what you're doing not only is going to please the person you're doing it for, but it's going to please the Lord. When my kids come to me and ask me for advice, I feel so like, oh, really? You want my advice? I get all like, really? You're not calling your friends, you're calling your mom? It's special. And the Lord is the same way. He thinks it's very special when you go to him. He loves it when his children go to him for advice, go to him, even with our mundane things, our daily things. It's powerful. It's powerful. I just want to thank everyone from the bottom of my heart for watching these videos, for supporting me, for liking, for sharing my videos on YouTube. Every comment is such an encouragement to me. I believe we're in a time right now that God's word is so important. I started this thinking if I'm the only one that see these videos, I'm still walking in obedience to God. If nothing else, my kids could look back one day and watch them. But I really do feel that this is an important time to take the time out every day to feed on God's word and to strengthen our spirits.